I never imagined that life would turn out this way. The days when I held my son in my arms, watched him take his first steps, and celebrated every milestone, those moments feel so far away now. I'm Sophia, and my story is one of heartbreak, betrayal, and a fight for justice that I never expected to wage. It's been years since those early days of motherhood when everything seemed simple and full of hope. But life has a way of turning even the brightest dreams into a tangled mess of disappointment. It was a sunny afternoon when it all started. The kind of day where the sun glows just a little brighter, and the air feels soft and warm against your skin. My house was quiet, as it often is these days. I had spent most of my life caring for others, nurturing my family, and now it felt like I was the only one left to carry the weight of everything. The walls of my home felt like they were closing in on me. But I didn't mind. I had my tea, my favorite chair by the window, and the comforting hum of life outside. I should have been content, right? I sat there, sipping my tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through me as I watched the sunlight filter through the curtains, casting golden patterns across the room. It was one of those moments when time seemed to pause, just long enough for me to catch my breath, that peace was about to be shattered. The phone rang, its sharp, insistent ring slicing through the stillness of the house. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach twist. It was Marcus, my son. Marcus, the boy I had raised, the boy who had been my whole world. He had always been such a sweet child, filled with curiosity and energy. I spent my days making sure he had everything he needed, guiding him through his childhood, making sacrifices along the way. His father, John, worked long hours, leaving me to carry the heavy load of parenting. But I didn't mind. I loved Marcus with every ounce of my being. When he got older, though, things began to change. I didn't want to admit it at first, but the distance between us grew. The calls became less frequent, the visits fewer. He had his own life now, and I understood that. But it didn't make the pain of it any easier to bear. The phone call, when it came, was usually just a polite check and a quick, "Hi, Mum. How are you doing?" And then the conversation would quickly end. But this time, something felt different. I could hear the uncertainty in Marcus's voice, the faint tremor that spoke volumes. "Hi, Mom," Marcus said, his voice slightly strained. "How's everything going?" I tried to sound cheerful, forcing a smile even though I knew it wasn't enough. "Everything's fine. How about you? How's Sarah and Ethan?" Ethan, my precious grandson. My heart softened at the thought of him. Ethan had been born with a disability, a condition that required constant care. I had watched Marcus and Sarah struggle to come to terms with it, too. Find the right doctors, the right treatments. But they loved him. I knew they did. At least I thought they did. "Yeah, everything's fine," Marcus replied, though his words didn't match the tone of his voice. "Ethan's doing okay, you know. Still getting through his therapy and all that. But you, Sarah and I have been talking, and we're planning to take a little vacation." A vacation. I froze. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. A vacation? How could they even think about going on vacation right now? Ethan was in a fragile state, both physically and emotionally. He needed both of his parents more than anything. My thoughts were racing, but I couldn't hold back my concerns any longer. "Marcus, a vacation? Now? What about Ethan? You can't just leave him behind. He needs both of you. You can't just run off, especially when things are so uncertain for him." Marcus's voice dropped slightly, as though he were bracing himself for a fight. "It's just for a week, Mom. We're going to get away for a bit, clear our heads. We've been under a lot of stress lately, and we really need this break." "Under stress?" I understood the weight they were carrying. But was that really enough to justify abandoning their son for a week? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I took a deep breath, trying to hold my emotions in check. "You're leaving Ethan with me then?" I asked, my voice softer now, but laced with disbelief. "Yeah, Mom. You've always been there for us. You're the only one we can trust with him." The words stung. They were asking me to take on everything. Again, I had always been there for Marcus and Sarah, but this was different. Ethan wasn't just a child who needed an occasional babysitter. Ethan had needs that were far beyond anything I had ever had to handle before. I could feel my heart beating faster. "Marcus, this isn't just about watching him. This is about being there for him. He's your son. He needs both of you. Don't you see that?" My voice shook, but I couldn't hold back any longer. "You can't just leave him like this." He sighed heavily, the weight of his own guilt making his words heavy. "Mom, you don't understand. We've been dealing with this for so long. It's been overwhelming. We need this break. Just this once. After the vacation, we'll be back, and everything will be fine." "Everything will be fine?" I echoed, the hurt in my voice growing. "Marcus, this isn't some trivial thing. Your son is struggling, and you're leaving him behind. Do you even realize what you're doing?" I could hear the tension building between us. The distance that had already begun to grow between us over the years seemed to stretch even further now. It was as if we were speaking different languages, unable to connect. I wanted to hold him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I couldn't. "Mum, please," Marcus said, his voice strained. "We just need some time. You know we love Ethan, but we need this time for ourselves. We've been at the end of our ropes. You'll understand once we're back." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You'll understand once we're back." Those words echoed in my head long after the call ended. I had always been there for Marcus, always supported him. But this was something I couldn't accept. As I hung up the phone, I sat there in silence. My mind was racing, my emotions torn between anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could they leave their son? How could they think that a vacation, of all things, was more important than the child they had brought into this world? I didn't know what to do. I had never felt so alone. The hurt was deep, like a wound that would never heal. I was left with more questions than answers. What kind of parents could do this? What had happened to the boy I had raised? The boy who once said he would never abandon those he loved. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind filled with the weight of what had just happened. Marcus and Sarah were leaving for a vacation, leaving me to care for Ethan, my disabled grandson, alone. I knew this was only the beginning. There were consequences to their choices, and I was beginning to see them more clearly than ever before. The week that followed was nothing like I expected. The days dragged on, each one blending into the next, and with each passing hour, the weight of Marcus and Sarah's decision grew heavier. Ethan, my precious grandson, was not the same boy he had been before they left. When they dropped him off at my house, he had been clingy, but there was still a spark in his eyes, a hint of the boy he once was. But now I could see it. The change was there, clear as day. His eyes were hollow, tired, and his small frame seemed even more fragile than before. I hadn't realized how much of a toll his parents' absence would take on him. I hadn't realized how much he relied on them. The first night without them, Ethan had cried himself to sleep. I sat beside him, gently rubbing his back, trying to calm him. His sobs broke my heart. "I want Mommy and Daddy," he whispered through the tears. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay, that they would come back soon. But how could I lie to him like that? How could I pretend that everything was fine when I knew deep down that it wasn't? I held him in my arms that night, my own heart breaking for the boy who just wanted his parents. I had tried to offer comfort in every way I knew, but there was nothing I could say to make him feel better. He missed them, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fill the void they had left. The next morning, I made breakfast for Ethan. He usually loved pancakes, but this morning, he barely touched them. Instead, he stared blankly at the plate, pushing the food around with his fork. It was as if he didn't even have the energy to eat. I tried to make conversation, asking him about his favorite toys or the shows he liked to watch, but he wasn't interested in talking. The light that usually danced in his eyes when I mentioned anything fun seemed dimmed as the days wore on. I found myself growing increasingly frustrated not with Ethan, but with Marcus and Sarah. They had made this decision without considering the impact it would have on their son. Ethan wasn't just any child. He was a child who needed constant care, constant reassurance, and above all, the love and presence of his parents. He wasn't just a baby left with a babysitter for a few hours while they went out for a date night. No, he was their child whose needs were more complex. And yet they were off somewhere, enjoying themselves, leaving me to pick up the pieces. I couldn't stop myself from thinking about the conversations Marcus and I had over the years. I had tried so hard to be a supportive mother, even when my own heart was breaking. I had done everything I could to help them, to give them the resources they needed. And yet, this was how they repaid me. With silence, with distance, with neglect. And the worst part, they didn't even seem to care. Marcus had assured me that everything would be fine after their vacation. He had promised me that they would be more involved once they got back, that things would go back to normal. But how could they? How could anything go back to normal when they had made the choice to abandon their son? How could they just go away for a week and expect everything to pick up where it left off? As the days turned into a week, I saw the toll their absence was taking on Ethan. He started regressing in his behavior, more frequent tantrums, more frustration, more confusion. I found myself spending hours just trying to soothe him, trying to find a way to make him feel safe again. But nothing seemed to help. At night, he would wake up screaming for his parents, and I would rush to his side, trying to comfort him. His fear was palpable, and I could feel it in my bones. He was terrified that they were never coming back, and I couldn't reassure him, not fully. Not when I knew they were out there, somewhere, having the time of their lives, while he was left to suffer in silence. In those moments, I found myself questioning everything. What had I done wrong as a mother? Had I failed to teach Marcus the importance of responsibility? Had I spoiled him, made him think that he could always rely on me when things got tough? Was this my fault? Had I somehow created this monster? This man who would abandon his own child for a vacation? I tried to push those thoughts away, but they kept creeping into my mind, gnawing at my heart. I had raised Marcus to be a good man. I had sacrificed so much for him, for his future. But now he was making decisions that didn't just affect him. His choices were hurting Ethan, and that was something I couldn't ignore. On the 7th day, I reached the breaking point. I had spent the entire day trying to distract Ethan, trying to make him feel at least a little bit better, but it wasn't working. His eyes were dull, his body slouched as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. And I knew it wasn't just the therapy sessions or the physical challenges of his disability. It was the emotional toll that his parents' absence was taking on him. Ethan was a sensitive child. He could sense that something was wrong. Was sitting with him in the living room when the phone rang again. It was Marcus. I picked up the phone, my voice tight with frustration. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." "Hey, Mom, how's Ethan doing?" he asked casually, as if everything was fine. How do you think he's doing? I shot back, unable to hold back the anger anymore. He misses you. He's not the same, Marcus. He's struggling. And you're still on your vacation. Don't you care about what's happening to him? He's your son. He needs you. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Mum, we've been through this. We needed this time for ourselves. We're coming back soon. Just give him some time. He'll adjust. Adjust? I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. You can't just expect him to adjust like everything's fine. He's not fine, Marcus. You left him behind. And now, he's suffering because of it. Don't you see that? I could hear Marcus sigh. I know you're upset, Mom, but we're doing the best we can. We're going to fix this. Just trust us. Trust. Them? How could I trust them when they had abandoned their son for a vacation? How could I believe that things would get better when they were so blind to the pain they had caused? I ended the call without another word. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay. I couldn't keep sitting by and watching my grandson fall apart, all because his parents didn't think twice before walking away from him. That night, as I sat by Ethan's bedside once, again holding his small hand in mine, I made a decision. I was done waiting, done being the one to pick up the pieces of their broken family. I had spent my life supporting Marcus and Sarah, but they had crossed a line, and now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I would make them understand. I would show them what it meant to take responsibility. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. The days after Marcus and Sarah returned from their vacation were nothing short of explosive. It was as if the dam had finally broken, and everything that had been simmering beneath the surface came rushing to the forefront. I had already made up my mind. I couldn't sit by quietly any longer. The consequences of their actions couldn't be ignored anymore, not by me, not by anyone. It was late in the afternoon when I heard their car pull into the driveway. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the sink, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. Ethan was in the living room, playing quietly, still withdrawn, still lost in his own world. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. It felt as though everything had been leading up to this moment. I didn't need to see their faces to know how they'd react. Marcus and Sarah had always been good at pretending everything was fine. But I had lived through enough of their behavior to know better. There was a coldness about them now, a distance that hadn't been there before. When they walked through the door, it was as though the air shifted. Marcus looked at me, but there was no warmth in his gaze, no apology. Just the same indifferent expression that had been there when we spoke on the phone before. Sarah, on the other hand, didn't even look at me at first. She was too busy fiddling with her phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media as if the real world, with all its problems, didn't exist. "Hi, Mom," Marcus said, his voice lacking the usual warmth. "Everything okay?" I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. My heart was heavy, my chest tight, but I didn't back down. "Okay?" I repeated, my voice quiet but firm. "You leave your son with me for a week, and then you come back as if nothing happened. Ethan is not okay, Marcus. He hasn't been okay since you walked out the door." There was a brief silence. Marcus's eyes flicked toward Ethan, who was still sitting on the couch, his eyes glazed over as he stared at the TV. Ethan didn't react when he saw his parents. He didn't run to them, didn't smile. He just sat there distant, his small body hunched as though he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I could see the guilt flicker in Marcus's eyes for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. "Mum, we talked about this. You've been taking care of him, right?" His tone was almost accusing, as if I had somehow made everything worse. "Taking care of him?" I echoed, my voice rising. Of course, I've been taking care of him. But it's not just about taking care of him, Marcus. It's about being there for him emotionally. He needs both of you. He needed you, and you weren't here. You left him with me and just disappeared. Sarah, who had been standing silently by the door, looked up then, her face unreadable. We needed this vacation, Sophia, she said, her voice flat. We've been under so much pressure. Don't act like you didn't know this was coming. You're always so eager to jump in and help. We thought this would give you a break. A break. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A break? I repeated, the word dripping with disbelief. This isn't about me. This is about Ethan. You left him behind like he didn't matter. You didn't even think about what this would do to him. And now, you expect me to just pretend it didn't happen. Sarah didn't respond right away. She just looked at me with that same cold, calculating expression I had seen when they got married. I had always known Sarah wasn't the warmest person. But this was different. This was a level of disregard I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about a vacation. It was about a complete lack of understanding of what their son needed. I glanced at Marcus, searching for any sign of the son I had raised. The boy who had once been full of life, who had laughed with me, who had looked to me for guidance. But instead of the loving son I remembered, I saw a man who had distanced himself from everything that mattered, his family, his responsibility, his son. And I knew, deep down, that nothing was going to change unless I made them face the consequences of their actions. I can't just keep letting this slide, Marcus, I said, my voice steady now, but filled with the weight of my decision. I've spent my whole life supporting you, raising you, helping you, but this is too much. Ethan deserves better than this. And you need to understand what it means to be a parent, not just when it's convenient. Marcus looked at me, his jaw tightening. What are you saying, Mum? I didn't flinch. I've sold your house. For a moment there was silence. Marcus and Sarah stared at me, wide-eyed. I could see the shock in their faces as they processed what I had just said. You what? Marcus stammered, his voice rising. I sold your house, I repeated calmly. You're not going to get away with this. You've treated me like your safety net for too long. And I'm done. I'm done being your fallback. You wanted a vacation, and you abandoned your son in the process. Now, you're going to face the consequences of your actions. The color drained from Marcus's face. You sold our house. He repeated, almost as if he couldn't believe it. That was our home, Mum. You can't just... I did, I interrupted. And it's gone. You wanted to leave Ethan behind. Well now, you'll have to live with that. Maybe this will teach you the lesson you need to learn. Maybe this will help you understand what it means to have responsibilities. This is the reality of your actions. You've made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences. The room was filled with an uneasy tension. Sarah, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice cold. You can't just sell our house. You don't have the right to make that decision for us. I do, I said firmly. I'm Ethan's grandmother, and I've been his primary caretaker these past weeks. You've shown me that you're not capable of handling your responsibilities. So now, you'll have to learn the hard way. There was a long silence as Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. The anger was palpable, but underneath it, I could see the fear. They knew I wasn't bluffing. We'll figure this out, Marcus said. Finally, his voice tight with frustration. But you've gone too far, Mom. You really have. I didn't back down. No, Marcus, you went too far. You left your son in a fragile state. And now, Maybe this will make you realize just how serious things really are. The confrontation that day was only the beginning of the fallout. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Sarah struggled with the loss of their home. They had to move into a small apartment, something temporary until they could figure things out. But it was clear to me that they were starting to feel the weight of their actions, even if they were too proud to admit it. Ethan, on the other hand, started to improve. Slowly. It wasn't an overnight change, but he was beginning to open up. Again, his parents' absence had taken a toll on him, but now that they were back, albeit begrudgingly, they were forced to confront what they had done. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And as for me, I had done what I needed to do. It wasn't about punishment. It was about teaching them responsibility, about showing them the consequences of their choices. Maybe, just maybe, they would learn from this. Maybe they would finally understand what it meant to be a parent. But, no matter what, I would continue to fight for Ethan. Because that's what family is supposed to do, support one another, no matter the cost, and no matter the pain.